This is Mauritius and Global Tourism Today. I'm Mr. Robin Nunkoo, if I pronounce this correctly, from the University of Mauritius. He's going to present to us. Robin, I'll give you the floor.
Thanks a lot, Louis, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Darren, for inviting me to this session. I'm just checking, guys. You can hear me well, right?
Very good. Robin.
Good. Okay, that's fine. So let's proceed. So thanks a lot, everyone. So what I'm going to talk about is how does Mauritius situate itself in the global tourism today? Okay, I wouldn't use the word post-pandemic at the moment because we are still facing the problem of the pandemic. So let's see the intricate relationship between tourism development, in particularly in Mauritius, and how does that relate to global tourism vis-a-vis the pandemic. Now, next slide, please, Louis. So I'll just start by situating the economic contribution of tourism to Mauritius. Okay, it's one of our main pillars. Okay, main economic policies generating lots of employment. 1 in 5 of the total workforce constitute the tourism employees. Okay, generating a revenue of around 1.3 billion. Okay, and indirectly contributing to 23.9% of total GDP. And I think I need not emphasize the role tourism plays in the socio-economic development of the local people, okay, in improving quality of life, in improving entrepreneurship opportunities. So I think tourism in Mauritius, like in many small islands, touches upon all aspects of our daily life, guys. Okay, next slide, please, please. Now, obviously, the reason we are here today is the sustainability challenges, but also because we are talking about tourism development in a current pandemic situation, an unprecedented pandemic, I must say. Now, this is just to provide you with the current status of the pandemic as at yesterday. Obviously, those figures have changed as we speak now. So as of yesterday, we had more than 150 million cases worldwide, more than 3 million deaths worldwide, okay, and more than 130 million people have recovered from the pandemic. Now, we are still a long way to go before we talk about the post-pandemic situation, but I think this provides you with a very nice context to understand, okay, under the environment in which we are talking about tourism and sustainability in here. So it's unprecedented, guys, when you look at the literature, when you look at what researchers say about this pandemic, it's unprecedented in terms of the socio-economic impact, the environmental impact, and its impact on quality of life. Next slide, please, Wayne. Good. Now, there's lots of debate about the role of travel and tourism. Okay, now we all know, and I think it's very visible to all tourism stakeholders, that the pandemic has impacted on the tourism industry immensely, guys. People have lost their jobs, hotels have closed down. WTTC, according to WTTC statistics, tourism arrival has fallen by more than 80% in 2020. Okay, and it's not going to pick up anytime soon. So we all know that the pandemic has impacted on the tourism industry a lot, but there's one thing that we also need to know is the role of travel and tourism in the proliferation of the pandemic, guys. And I think I'm not going to go through all those academic studies, but I think there's no single evidence, okay, that do not point out that tourism and travel do not contribute to pandemic spread. Okay, so mobility in general, okay, domestic mobility, international mobility is clearly linked to the pandemic. And I think it's very logical. The more people moves, be it domestically and be it internationally, the threat, okay, to disease spread is higher. And this has been empirically proven in a number of studies. And you can see those studies in the PowerPoint slide that's in front of you at the moment. Thanks a lot, Luke. Can you please move on? Okay, now in one of my own study that we did with the university, one of the universities in Australia and Germany, okay, we used data from 92 countries to look at whether those countries that have received more international tourism, okay, whether they have had a higher level of COVID-19 cases and death. And guess what? We did find a relationship. So those countries that still opened their borders in 2020, they are those countries that have also experienced higher level of confirmed COVID-19 cases and death. And this is why, obviously, at an immediate reaction to the pandemic, next slide, please, Louis. At an immediate reaction to the pandemic, many governments, have closed the borders. And there has been lots of debate about the effectiveness of border closure. And there's one thing that I would like to mention when you talk about border closure does not prevent the disease from spreading a country. It just delays the epidemic or the pandemic by about 3 weeks. So if the government has closed the border today, you can expect that we are going to be safe for only 3 weeks. So border closure, does not prevent a pandemic, and it's not the ultimate situation, guys. And because when you talk about border closure, you're also making a trade-off between lives and livelihood. I think that's a debate that the Mauritian government has been having for the past couple of months now. Because no single country can rely on significant border closure to prevent a country from getting contaminated with a pandemic. And what is required, therefore, is multiple intervention, non-pharmaceutical measures, but now we also have the vaccine. So that changes the circumstances a lot as well. But I just need to mention at this stage that border closure is clearly not economically sustainable for any country. Next slide, please, Lord. Now, obviously, there has been epidemiological study, empirical study that has been carried out looking at the effectiveness of different. Louis, can you go back to slide 15, please? Just to put the participant back in context, I was talking about the measures in relation to COVID-19. And there's no one size fit all, just to summarize this part. So each country, each economy must design its own measures to deal with COVID-19 transmission and death. Next slide, please. Now, obviously, this brings me to a very important concept about what challenges do Mauritius tourism face in this current pandemic and the post-pandemic world. Now, obviously, the first challenge we face, and unfortunately, there's nothing much we can do about it, we're a small island developing state. We are part of the SIDS network. Now, because we are part of the SIDS network, our first very characteristic is we're small. So we do not have opportunities for domestic tourism like other countries. Australia focusing a lot on domestic tourism, the US, the UK, they're all focusing on domestic tourism. We do not have that opportunity. Now, particularly challenging is our insularity and remoteness, two very important characteristics or vulnerability of small island developing states like Mauritius. We are surrounded by sea and we are remote, which means that the role of air travel is crucial in our tourism industry. Now, when you talk about the role of air travel or air transport in this current pandemic world, you are talking about perception of risk. There's lots of psychological implication of traveling now, especially if it's long distance. That the fear of traveling. Potential travelers keep asking the question, am I safe? What about the risk of contamination? So there's lots of psychological variable that comes into play when we talk about role of air transport. And this is where Mauritius is at a disadvantage. And that's a particular challenge. And unfortunately, there's nothing much we can do about it at the moment. Now, we talked about community resilience. Kartika talked a lot, I just heard her mentioning about community, the role of community. Now, as a community, we are not resilient enough to deal with COVID-19, right? And there's lots of work to do to make the community resilient. And obviously that resiliency will then spill over to the tourism industry, guys. You like it or not, when I'm talking about community resilience, is our ability to rebound, when we are faced with a pandemic. So community resilience is extremely very important if we want to have a tourism industry that's going to sustain in the post-pandemic environment. Now, there's also the issue of perception of our healthcare system. The perception, I'm not saying we do not do well on our healthcare system, but I think the perception of it, which matters a lot now. Think about it. In any country you would be traveling to now, you would say, okay, what's the state of the healthcare there? Okay, what's the quality of the hospital, which I think, okay, needs to be integrated in our marketing strategy. But that's a challenge. We are from a small island developing country, so we have the developing country perception in terms of our healthcare system, which may not necessarily be true. But optics and perception matters a lot when you talk about travel, when you talk about travel behavior. Next slide, please, Louis. Now, obviously, as a small island developing states, the nature of our tourism industry means that we are very dependent on the international market. And Kartika's presentation talked about our main market and how they have been impacted by COVID-19. Okay, and this is what I wanted to emphasize in here. Okay, domestic tourism plays very limited role. So our international market is our major sources of tourism revenue, but obviously then we are very vulnerable to what's happening there. And this is why we talked about the dependency problem. Small island developing state, they are dependent on the international market. And obviously the immediate response to the pandemic was border closure, and the debate was lives versus livelihoods. Okay, now obviously this is an ongoing debate. Now I think we do not understand our market well at the moment. Travel behavior have changed now. Okay, the COVID-19 pandemic had led to a different psychological process travelers would go through. Now, and we do not understand that enough. I think we lack a lot of market research in Mauritius, because if we want to remarket the destination, or what we call a post-pandemic recovery, we need to understand what are the new travelers looking for, what are the new requirements, and we do not understand that much. And I think we have been reactive rather than proactive when it comes to remarketing the destination at the moment. Next slide, please. Now, Louis, can you go to the first website? What I wanted to show in here, guys, I think when I'm talking about market research, it does not necessarily involve spending money. Okay, all the data are already available. Now, what you are saying in here is data that has been gathered and worked by University of Oxford. Now, if you look at this website, guys, it provides you with a number of information as to what's going on in other countries. Okay, what is the current state of internal movement in other countries? What's the current state of international travel control in other countries? Which countries have opened their border? Right? Yes, if you can scroll. So if you look at those, what you're seeing in your screen, guys, you can also see the vaccination policy that has been undergoing in other countries, guys. Louis, can you go into the second website now, Our World in Data for Vaccination? Just to give you an example, this website, these statistics provide you with the state of vaccination in other countries. Now, the reason I'm presenting those to you is because obviously vaccination will have a big impact on travel. Okay, vaccination will have a big impact on how people will travel and whether they will travel or not. So we have those information. Mauritian authorities do have access to this information because it's publicly free. So I think we need to make use of those to be able to understand what's happening in our main market. Okay, and how do we market those? So I think the data is very self-explanatory. I think now that you have shared the website, I'm hoping you all will make use of it and try to see what's happening out there in our main market, guys. And I think it's fascinating to know all the statistics about COVID-19 cases, number of vaccination, travel closure, border control, etc. Next slide, please, Wayne. Now, obviously, at the moment, stakeholders are very pessimistic about the industry. Okay, but history tells us about the post-pandemic booms. Okay, post-pandemic booms, okay, suggest that people after any pandemic or any crisis, people will travel more than ever. People will spend more, they will take more risk. If you look at the process of industrialization that have taken place in many European countries in the 1800s, it preceded the pandemic. It preceded the pandemic, guys. There was a very nice article in The Economist that talk about post-pandemic booms. Okay, so let's not be pessimistic about it. Let's be optimistic about it. And in fact, I've supported the argument I'm making today by research conducted by Morgan Stanley. And look at the projected global GDP growth for 2021 is 6.4%. It's going to be led by the emerging market, what we call the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, followed by the US and also the European countries where prosperity will start happening, GDP will grow. IMF have recently revised the global GDP growth from 5.5% to 6%, guys. And all these suggest that obviously there are opportunities out there, and we just need to be able to know how do we take it? How do we target about those markets? Understanding the new markets, understanding the new travel behaviors, understanding the health and sanitation requirement. I think we can do well at the destination if we're able to put a comprehensive strategy that takes into account all those variables. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to particular travel, Expedia Group recently surveyed people, and 46% said they would be more likely to travel when a vaccine become available. And we have the vaccine now, so people will travel. Okay, and I also need to emphasize in here, there's one thing that would boost up travel, is the psychological stress caused by COVID-19, the boredom caused by COVID-19. And this is psychological research that says that, guys. People will want to get away from their usual environment. People would want to experience contact with nature. Okay, I've also provided you with evidence of a survey on 8,000 people, found that 65% of the respondents they surveyed will be traveling more in 2021 than they did pre-COVID. So the opportunities are there, guys. And I think there's one thing that obviously we can do well is train travel advisors. And those travel advisors need to have proper knowledge about health, tourism, psychology, tourist behavior, and economics as well. The economy coming to play because of the costs involved in traveling anyway. So they're the combination of variable that needs to be integrated in a proper marketing strategy. Next slide, please, Will. Right. Obviously, our strength now in terms of opportunities, we have comparatively low number of COVID-19 cases and deaths. And that is one of our unique selling point. We do better than Seychelles. We do better than many of those countries in the Indian Ocean, guys. Okay, one more thing, very important. Our tourism product is outdoor based, the 3S. And where does this come into play at the moment? This comes into play because this is what the tourists will be looking for. They want to get away. They want to what we call kind of recovery travel, okay, or health rejuvenating travel, okay. And obviously, we also have a unique selling point because we receive lots of leisure travel. So leisure travel will fuel economic recovery, while business travel will take longer. And obviously, this is why this is an opportunity I think we need to tap on. Next slide, please. Now, obviously, let me just conclude that by saying we do have opportunities, guys, right? There are challenges which we cannot do much about, but I think there's opportunities. If we put all our heads together, we can come up with a comprehensive marketing strategy of Mauritius. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much for this. I have never seen such a passionate talk about COVID-19. Thanks, Robin, for giving us this new, I would say, new glasses on the possibilities. I want to add one personal story. When I faced this COVID-19, I was riding my bike from South Germany to North Germany, and I can confirm what you said, Robin. Any kind of crisis that you see, there are chances, despite the fact that we have a huge challenge right now. Thanks so much, Robin, for sharing that, for this look into the future. Great.
Pleasure. Thanks, Andre. I think it's going to happen. Okay, we need to focus on the post-pandemic movement. That's the hot topic at the moment, post-pandemic movements.
Some people in the chat said that we might never be post-COVID, but always be with. So that's a challenge itself, but great, you're fully right. We have to see the possibilities. So if you stay with us, have a discussion in the rooms with us, and we're happy that you already are part of this project right from the beginning. Robin, thanks.
Pleasure, Andre. It's been a pleasure to contribute. Thanks for your insight as well.
Great.